welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 300, cover dated May 1993. So, as is made plain in the corner box, an X-Men Anniversary Spectacular, the 300th issue of the title, coinciding with it being 30 years of X-Men comics since 1963, and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's first issue of the title. So this is also a cover that marks the return of John Romita Jr. as regular penciler on the title, and he's paired here with Dan Green, his inking partner or artistic partner from his first run on the title. So that goes all the way back to issue 211, and then of course he had the fill-in issue with many inkers including Scott Williams, 287, the issue that featured Bishop and introduced the X-Trader plot. So here we've got mostly the gold team on cover with the addition of Wolverine and Cyclops. And let's open this one up to the splash page. And this is pretty cool. So speaking of issue 211, it's more or less been since then Mutant Massacre that Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler, has appeared in this title. So here he is, bamfing onto a northern French beach, and he's gotten some coordinates from Professor X as to where he is to teleport to, and he thinks to himself here, once an X-Man, always an X-Man. So visiting from the pages of Excalibur for this anniversary issue. And here we have a gun trained on him, and it turns out to be Forge, who is operating a very 90s blocky John Romita Jr. Tech here, and he's testing Nightcrawler with this particular restraint cocoon, which of course Nightcrawler, using his mutant teleporting powers, can easily escape. And there he is, he appears behind Forge. And Forge is pretty, he's in a pretty low mood in his appearance in this issue. He was in the previous issue. He is responding to Professor X's request for some help. And it's explained here by him in this particular panel. There's a 60-mile dead zone here along the northern coastline of France, an unnatural phenomenon. Cerebro's mutant detecting sensors can't penetrate. When Xavier arrives, assure him this portable booster unit he requested should help identify the source of the interference. So Nightcrawler's asking him here, you're leaving? And Forge says, well, he doesn't quite give an answer just yet. But he removes Nightcrawler's hand from his shoulder and says, I'm not an X-Man, Kurt, not anymore. I came here tonight strictly as a favor to Xavier. You want to fight this good fight? Enjoy yourself. I prefer to live in the real world. So, Nightcrawler says to him, you are suggesting the rest of us are living in a fantasy? A group of mutants, says Forge as he gets aboard his kind of hover bike. A group of mutants risking their lives to create a world where everyone is treated equally? It's the stuff of dreams, Kurt, and dreams are for people that sleep. So Forge, disenchanted with Professor X's dream of living peacefully with people, humans who otherwise hate and fear mutants, and Kurt here thinking that dreams are windows, mein Freund, glimpses of the world as it can be tomorrow instead of the way it is today. So he's working with the Cerebro tool left to him by Forge, and says, point me in the direction of the newest mutant. Tell me he or she may be the one that will bridge the gap between humans and mutants. Even if it's not the truth, tell me there is still a reason to hope. And great storytelling on these pages by John Romita Jr. That is fundamentally John Romita Jr.'s strength, is storytelling. So clear, such great command of body language of the characters, facial expressions, everything. and a great recombination of Romita Jr. and Dan Green. And this go around, Romita Jr. is penciling, providing full pencils, so greens, inks over Romita Jr. Are more aligned with Romita Jr.'s style. A little bit different from what the arrangement was on the first run, where Romita Jr. was only providing breakdowns and Dan Green was finishing the art. Something else before moving on from this couple of pages here is Romita Jr.'s rendition of Rain. This is one of his strengths also, so we can see the spatters and drops on the Cerebro device and Kurt's hair and then on his face, and the rain lashing off the side of his face, the 3/4 profile there. Another one of Romita Jr.'s strengths. Now I must say also, but I'll turn the page, I must say also, because here we get our double page splash with title of the story, Legacies, and the credits. So we've got Scott Lobdell writer, John Romita Jr. penciler, Dan Green inker, Chris Eliopoulos letterer, and Steve Buccellato colorist. Now, in my video on issue 299, I said that that was Brandon Peterson's last issue of X-Men before going to Image Comics, and I was wrong, because he actually provides a backup story in this anniversary issue. So the main story by Romita Jr. is 48 pages, and that's its title here, Legacy, and then there's this epilogue at the end, 8 pages by Brandon Peterson. And when I got this comic originally back in 1993, I was disappointed to see that Brandon Peterson wasn't handling the main story, and indeed that he was leaving the book, because I rather enjoyed his art at the time. And I hadn't yet at that time acquired a taste for Romita Jr. But shortly afterwards, later on that year, with the release of Frank Miller and Romita Jr.'s Daredevil Man Without Fear 5-issue miniseries, that's when Romita Jr. kind of clicked for me. Also, there's an upcoming issue of Uncanny where he clicked for me as well. If memory serves, it might be 304. But at this point, I wasn't really on board with it. But now looking at it from this vantage point, 30 years later, this is great. This is fantastic. This is amazing. I love it. And so here we have Colossus, Wolverine, and Bishop breaking their way into this burning cottage, which is supposed to be Moira MacTaggart's. Again, in France, in northern France. And it turns out that Moira's not there. Thankfully, she wasn't killed in the attack. But what is going on? And Aurora Storm uses her power to douse the flames of the fire. And then Wolverine confirms. Now for the good news, people. Moira was never in the fire. The smell of burnt flesh is distinctive that way. Nonetheless, someone wanted us to think she's dead. So who could that be? Well, we'll find out, naturally enough, in a few pages' time. There's more of that great Romita Jr. Rendition of Rain. We see the drops bouncing off Colossus's metallic back there. And then he's hit with a rock. And it turns out there's an angry crowd of locals with rakes, and I'm sure there's a pitchfork there. Yes, there is here. And this woman with a handgun says, "Your kind are not welcome here, X-Men. Or did you think we'd forgotten the damage you did last time you came to France in your so-called trial for Magneto?" So that's a reference to the previous anniversary issue, Uncanny X-Men 200. There's a video review of that issue on the channel, and that was the one that saw Magneto on trial for crimes against humanity in Paris. So nice to have that little callback to that issue. And Professor X says, "We apologize for any inconvenience, good people. We will be on our way." And so they appear to disappear, but they're not. Professor X is using his telepathy to make it appear to the crowd that they've gone. And Wolverine says to him, "Mind control, Chuck, don't seem like your style." And Professor X responds telepathically as they board the Blackbird. "Desperate times, desperate measures. I would imagine you, Wolverine, more than any of the others would understand that." "Didn't say I don't understand it," says Wolverine, "just don't like it much." If it is of any comfort, Logan, I like it even less. So we're seeing here a kind of a darkening of Professor X's attitude and what he's prepared to do to get what he wants done. A little bit of flexibility on the means to get to his end, his dream of peaceful coexistence. And we can see that coming out in the art here as well, where he's got more of a grimmer visage depicted in these panels. Of course, Moira's missing, and Professor X continues to think here, but then life seldom quite works out the way one plans. So we have a flashback to a time before the foundation of the X-Men, where he is having an outdoor picnic with Moira MacTaggart, and she's asking him, "You're serious? You've been talking about this for years. You're going to start a mutant strike force." And he says, "Hardly, Moira. My intent has always been to open a school." So we've got those two sides to Professor X's dream and vision, the school and the strike force. School first, though. A place young mutants, he continues to say to her, could go to learn to use their genetic attributes. An institute set up to accommodate their unique needs. And then we get to see his files on the freshman class. And of course, we've got the original 5 X-Men there, Jean Grey, Cyclops and the rest, Hank McCoy there as a quarterback. And then we've got, this is interesting, he also had files on the all-new X-Men. We've got Storm, we've got Colossus, we've got Nightcrawler. And he says, should the need arise, I foresee them as the next generation of X-Men. And Moira says to him, "X-Men, Charles, not too egotistical, as in Xavier? I hadn't even thought of that. It stands for something extra in their genes, the X factor which separates humans from mutants." So that's the origin. And then also he's got a file on Magneto, and or rather Moira does, and she hands it to Professor X, and he kind of says here in shock, "He's back, worse than back. He's plotting something as well," says Moira. "He was after the security parameter for Cape Citadel. Can you imagine the world's nuclear arsenal in the hands of Magnus?" And of course, that harks back to what he did in issue 1 of X-Men. So nice callbacks here from Lobdell worked into this anniversary issue. And, you know, Magneto kind of, the flashback actually turning into something else, an audio-visual telecast of, is it Professor X's memories? No. If we turn this like this, you'll see over here in this containment unit, it's actually Moira MacTaggart. And this Acolyte, Milan is his name, is able to use his mutant power to extract Moira's memories and send them as television signals to the screens here, so that Fabian Cortez and this new character, Amelia Voght, or Vought, I'll pronounce her name Vought, but open to correction if anybody knows the correct pronunciation of her name. It's a strange one. And then this little neophyte character here, nervous with the cutlery and dishes. And basically what's going on is Fabian Cortez is overseeing this extraction of secrets from Moira's memories. And what he's after is the process she used back in X-Men 2 and 3, adjectiveless X-Men 2 and 3, to take over the minds and wills of the X-Men before they broke that. So there's a little bit of tension here between Amelia Voght, I'll just move that up for you so you can see that, and Cortez. I love this, like, this angle on Cortez's face. So we're looking up from below and it's a 3/4 profile. Very, very difficult to do, inventive by Romita Jr. Keeping the storytelling really interesting, moving our camera, so to speak, around. And I also like what he's doing with the hatching on the face, where you get the molding, almost like 3D of the faces here with this hatching technique that he's indicating to Dan Green to finish in the inks. So Moira is the worse for wear after this session with Milan. And then Voght continues her argument with Cortez, making us all beholden to a human Cortez. If Magneto hadn't already died, this would certainly have killed him. So their argument rages, and in the meantime, this young acolyte brings some food and water to Moira, and he doesn't look like he's 100% on board with the way that she's being treated. And then we get a view of like a castle, an abandoned monastery that is Mont Saint Francis, and that is where the Blackbird is making for. And aboard we have Colossus here, and there's that hatching technique again, where you get the sculpting of the forms of the face. I think it's really effective, and I like the way that Buccellato has colored it here as well. And Colossus is on a video call with Stevie Hunter, who's looking after Colossus's young sister Ileana, who's got a bad cough and flu. What's all that about? And Iceman says to him, "Relax, Colossus. I know just how it feels when you're weight." And Colossus interrupts and says, "I doubt that you do, Robert. Pardon? I came from a close, loving household, only to have lost each member of my family to one tragedy after another. Ileana is the most important person in my life. Without her, I have nothing. Don't demean my feelings by claiming you understand, for you most certainly do not." So Iceman, taken aback, "Excuse me for caring, tin head," he calls after Colossus. And, you know, this is an important point. Colossus is not happy anymore. And it won't take much to push him over the edge. And we shall see what happens in upcoming issues. So here we've got a nice long double page shot of the cockpit of the Blackbird with all of the major figures up front. Iceman working on a snowball there to throw at Colossus, a bit juvenile, but that is Iceman's character under Lobdell. And here we have the Blackbird arriving to meet Nightcrawler on the beach. And Nightcrawler, Storm asks, "Kurt, you are alone?" And Nightcrawler says, "I'm as surprised as you are. I assumed Forge would stay at least until the rest of you arrived. Yet he bolted out of here as if the Sentinels were coming." And then he realizes, "Did I just stick my tail in my mouth?" And Storm, "No, not at all, my friend. Tell me, have you been taking care of my kitten?" That's Kitty Pryde Shadowcat. So, of course, you know, there was the whole business in issues 289 and 90 of Forge proposing to Storm and then retracting his proposal. So everybody's aware of this. It would be an awkward moment. We're told in the narrative captions that Storm wanted to speak to Forge, but he's gone. He left. And then we have this reunion of the original, all new X-Men, going back to Giant Size X-Men. These two haven't been on panel with Nightcrawler conscious since Mutant Massacre. So this is quite the reunion years later in terms of the reader's timeline. I love this little establishing shot here. 30 miles up the coastline. It's that abandoned monastery. Not so abandoned though. And I love the rendering of the lines of the roof and walls, the architecture here, and still that rainstorm as well. It's beautifully done by Romita Jr. and Dan Green. Really quality work from the pair on this issue. And so we have this continuing tension between Voght and Cortez regarding what to do with Moira MacTaggart. And Moira is not so out of it that she isn't able to stick her hand out of this little portal and grab Cortez by his ponytail and pull him towards the containment unit and say to him, "Wouldn't want to argue with you, Fabian, not you, the man who murdered." He tells her to shut up, they'll kill us both. He whispers it to her. "No one is interested in your lies," he says out loud. "It's the truth, Cortez. Remember, I was there too when you..." She's talking about X-Men number 3. "Enough, human sow. You've abused even the modicum of courtesy I've extended," as he breaks free finally. And she passes out. And Cortez says, "Summon Milan immediately. You were right, Vought. She was undeserving of her compassion. Take the remainder of her memories at once and do what you'd like with the mindless husk that remains. So she heads off, and here's our neophyte again, and he is not really 100% on board. And Moira says to him, she says to him, didn't anyone ask, didn't you wonder why Cortez was the last to see Magneto alive? How he managed to escape while the other acolytes died? She says, they didn't sacrifice themselves. Cortez left them to die after he used his power to kill Magneto. So this German-speaking mutant has a kind of a phasing power. He closes his ears, but she calls after him as he phases through the floor. He'll slay you all as easily as he killed Magneto. So we'll see how that pans out a little later in the issue. This is a great one-page panel here of Archangel flying with Bishop. They have a little back and forth here, and Bishop tells him to set him down because he spied the monastery and reckons, he says, trust me, we found the enemy. So inside the monastery, great barrel vaulting here and columns by Romita Jr. Like, this is good stuff. Romita Jr. not cutting corners on the art here. So Cortez goes somewhere private, as he thinks, and calls out for the Games Master, demands an audience with him. So Cortez, one of the upstarts, and he says aloud, you claim to be an omnipath, your mind in all places at all times. As leader of the upstarts, I demand you to contact Shaw, Fitzroy and Creed, the other members of the upstarts. It appears I may have need of their resources. So Games Master appears, and he basically draws out of Cortez. He says, you will have to make do with the herd of mindless sheep you've taken such care to tend. If you've been observing everything, says Cortez, as you claim you do, you know my hold on them is founded on the assumption I am Magneto's chosen successor. You also know that assumption is totally false. You're saying if they knew the truth, Games Master asks him, and he says, about what I did to that relic, they would turn on me in an instant if they knew it was I who killed their precious Magnus. That's why I may need the protection of the other upstarts. No, and Neophyte has been listening the whole while. Games Master knows it. And Cortez is absolutely irate. You knew he was there, didn't you? You set me up, why? And Games Master says, the answer should be obvious, Cortez. Anything to keep the game interesting, otherwise, why bother? So, Games Master needs to have his fun and sport. So Cortez uses his power to charge up the Neophyte's own power of phasing, which sends him way too far outside of the monastery, and lands unconscious in mud and water outside the boundaries of the monastery. And then we have the arrival of the other X-Men catching up with Bishop and Archangel. And Cyclops says, we can't invade this monastery without some kind of confirmation that Moira is being held here. And this is an interesting bit of characterization. Storm interrupts and she says, Cyclops, must I remind you, I am responsible for the gold team. Bishop's instincts have proven, and Professor X corroborates, correct it would seem, Cerebro has located an unidentified mutant, just this moment regaining consciousness. So this is indeed now, they're pretty sure, the base of the Acolytes. And the Neophyte is awoken by a local woman who offers to take care of him because he's just a person in trouble. And then she is blasted from behind and killed. And who has done this except for Fabian Cortez's personal guard? So these are new characters being introduced here. We've got Senyaka, we have got Spore, and the other guy here, Katu, I think this guy here, yes. And so Senyaka catches the Neophyte with his sonic, what would I call it, or what does he call it? like, what is it? Sonic Whip, right, indeed. But it is sliced by Wolverine with his adamantium claws. Pretty cool anchor image here of Wolverine standing over Senyaka, and then Spore goes after him. But just at this point, Iceman drops a huge block of ice on him, and this guy makes to warn the others of the X-Men's arrival, but he's taken out by an optic blast of Cyclopses. Okay, so the neophyte here is surprised. I don't understand, he says. She was no threat to them, yet they killed her only because she was human. So, of course, this is something that Professor X can speak to. Nice anchor image here of the X-Men and the boy kneeling over the body of the young woman. Professor X says, there is another way, a path which even Magneto walked for a brief time. Indeed, after Uncanny X-Men 200, there are those of us who believe the world is large enough to accommodate both mutants and humans. We fight, it seems, every waking moment of our lives to bring to fruition a dream of a better world. But then we switch to the inside of the monastery. Cortez is having a temper tantrum. Things are going wrong for him, and he's getting ready to kill Moira. But will there be time for that? No. This is a great double-page spread. Half spread here and another one below. So we've got Nightcrawler bounding into action, kicking Cortez in the neck. That would be painful. Colossus here, what a punch he's throwing. And then down below, we've got Cyclops and Bishop phasing up through the floor, courtesy of the neophyte who has turned sides. And there's the Kleinstock twins, formerly triplets, getting blasted by Bishop. Some payback there. And then we have in this great, kind of a weird choice. It's not one whole page, it kind of moves over to the second page, but there's only a small kind of margin in the second page. Kind of odd choice by Romita Jr., but nice anchor image nonetheless of Archangel, Jean Grey and Storm and Wolverine coming through the wall as well, reinforcing the other two strike teams of X-Men. We've got this guy Milan about to kill Moira, but he's caught in the back by Archangel's metallic flechette feathers. And we've got Bishop seeing Fabian Cortez running like a coward away from the battle. So Bishop goes after him. And then we've got a couple of pages of just action sequence. You know, you've got John Romita Jr. drawing your book. You want some action sequences. And, you know, Romita Jr. excels at this kind of art. So we've got Unishione going up against Archangel here. We've got Colossus is in absolutely foul humor. This is a great image of him breaking her sonic exoskeleton from behind, just smashing it. You can see his back muscles there, everything. Wonderful art by Romita Jr. He's getting ready pretty much to pommel her, but he has to turn around to help out Nightcrawler and Archangel. And so here he is on his way, but we have a thought from him, compromising my desires in place of my responsibility again. So Colossus is getting tired of this. He has been having his doubts about being part of the X-Men and Professor X's dream. And then we've got Frenzy here, but she goes by the name Cargill now. She's facing off against Iceman. They faced off many times against each other back in X-Factor, the X-Factor days when she was a member of the Alliance of Evil. But Iceman shows her he's got a new control over his power now. He's got this new kind of spiky version of himself that is ice the whole way through. And so he dispenses with her easily on this occasion. Cyclops here dealing with this guy and blasting him through the wall with his optic blasts. Very cool stuff from Romita Jr. Then we've got Jean arriving to help Moira, who's still alive. And then she is ripped from behind by this Acolyte. who says his name is Seamus Mellencamp. He seems to be Irish. Interesting second name though for an Irish person. And this really ticks Jean off. This is a wonderful image here of her just letting rip with her sonic ability and blasting this guy out of the monastery to somewhere in the Pyrenees. Wonderful action sequence here by Romita Jr. This is what you want with Romita Jr. working on the book. So then she uses her TK to bring Moira out of the monastery. So back inside though, the X-Men have no illusions that they've won the war. They've won a battle but not the war. And then Professor X comes up to, or comes into this particular room where he finds Voght in front of something that's illuminated here, but we can't quite see what it is yet. And it turns out, and this is an interesting move by Lobdell, that Professor X and Voght have a history. And she says, or he says to her, "I knew it was you, Amelia. Your sight patterns are unmistakable." And she says, "Are they, sir, after all these years you spent on your own?" He says to her, "Because you'd convinced me you wanted no part in my class of original students." Sorry, he says to her, "You claimed you had no desire to take sides in. That was when I still had a family," she says, "people who cared for me. Before I lost everyone I love, lost them to the flat scans. That was before I found another way." So this shocks Professor X, and then he sees what she was kneeling in front of. And it's Magneto's helmet. There's all these candles burning in front of it. It's Magneto's way that she turned to. And Professor X asks her, "How did you get this? Where did it come from?" But she's gone in a blinding flash of light. A failure from Xavier's past, somehow tied into the struggle yet to come, the fire next time. And the next time that we will get more information on what exactly was the nature of the prior relationship between Amelia and Professor X is upcoming issue 309. But up on the roof, we've got Cortez, and he's looking to be teleported out, or rather that a satellite capable of transporting him out of this fiasco, right? But here he's caught from behind. This is a great image. Whose hand is emerging here? It's Bishop's, of course. And he pulls him down through the roof and gets his hand around his throat. And then Aurora arrives with Wolverine to tell him to stop from killing this guy, Cortez. And he also tells him, it's interesting, "You've got all the trappings of a major player, but get this, in the future where I was raised, no one has ever heard of you. That either means you scratched somewhere along the line, or maybe you died in the here and now," as he gets ready to kill him. But then Cortez uses the pause to use his own mutant powers on Bishop and to forcibly have Bishop exhaust all his energy, expend it from every part of his body in a single blast. So now he's getting ready, standing over Bishop to kill him. But then the Neophyte arrives and distracts Cortez. Cortez gets ready to deal with him, but then, this is great, just in this panel with the sound effect, and then the aftermath of the action, we see that Wolverine has stabbed him in the abdomen, but he's still breathing, the black blood dripping off Wolverine's clothes there. And so then, that's it. Things are wrapped up, and the only thing that remains is a heart-to-heart between Professor X and the Neophyte. And Professor X invites him, obviously, to join them, but the Neophyte refuses, and he says, "When the day comes that he can trust again, you will hear from me. Until then, I'm afraid I must find my own way in the world. For you and Magneto are both great men, Professor Xavier, and your dreams might be more similar than either of you realize." Professor X looking quite grim-faced as he thinks about what the boy has said to him. Great work by Romita Jr. On the art. And now we've got this coda epilogue. and it's Brandon Peterson here. So the team here, Scott Lobdell script, Brandon Peterson pencils, first 4 pages inked by Dan Panosian, the last 4 pages inked by Al Milgrom, Richard Starkins letters, so a different letterer here, and Glynis Oliver colors. And this makes me think it would have been nice to have Glynis Oliver color the main story so that we had more of that original team reunited. Obviously Orzechowski's gone from Marvel, he's working for Todd McFarlane on Spawn, but to have Romita Jr., Dan Green and Glynis Oliver reunited, that would have been sweet. So Cortez has survived being slashed by Wolverine, and it turns out that he has been rescued by Voght, and so she brings him from the hospital that he was in for a week, and she says, "As you can no doubt attest, my mutant mode of transport is nowhere near as enjoyable as, say, Nightcrawler's. I had to ensure your wounds were sufficiently healed. The last thing I need to be accused of is trying to kill our anointed leader." So he hears something in her tone, and he's wondering whether she suspects that he killed Magneto, as he thinks. And he says here, "It is hardly the way to address he who speaks in the voice of Magneto. No, Fabian, it is not," she says as she walks off. And then the Games Master appears to Cortez, and he says, "My leadership of the upstarts will be undisputed," because he wants them to add to his points tally the death of Bishop. He thinks Bishop must have died, but the Games Master replies, "On the contrary, Cortez, on both counts. It seems the young man is more resilient than anyone gave him credit for, the exception being Fitzroy. As to your role as Czar of the upstarts, let's just say you should hold off changing the title on your stationery anytime soon. I'm sorry to inform you, recent complications have arisen which necessitate that I will take away all the points you've acquired to date." So Cortez is shocked. What possible complications could change that? "Figure it out for yourself," says the Games Master. So Cortez starts thinking, how could I possibly lose the points for Magnus's death unless... His eye pops open. "No," he says. Well, there's only one way he could lose the points for Magnus's death, and that is indeed if he didn't kill him, yes? So, Professor X's then, the last 4 pages, we've got Professor X and Moira MacTaggart thinking about this virus that has been affecting mutants. Moira was recently in Genosha trying to help some of the mutates there who were infected with this particular virus. They're examining its DNA coding here. And Moira says, I can't believe the fates can be this cruel. Is pain and suffering, death and dying always going to be the legacy of being born a mutant?" So this phrasing of Moira sets Professor X thinking. Legacy. That word. And then we have him thinking here. Moira MacTaggart's question provokes an unexpected response in Charles Xavier's mind. In an instant, he realizes where that word was used with such regularity. He thought it was a code and feared it was a warning. And here we've got text from Strife's strike file on Ileana Rasputin, child of innocence, demon of hate, smiling girl in a field, frenzied teen in a war zone, a flower in her fingers, a sword in her hand. In time, one would find out, but time is something not everyone has much of. No matter the age, no matter the desire, my legacy may strike anyone born of mutant blood, from the oldest of the old to the youngest of the young. "Dear God, please no," says Professor X quietly. "Moira, I realize it's difficult for you to talk about, but you are the only person with hands-on experience in treating this disease. What can you tell me about its treatment?" "Precious little, I'm afraid," she says. "In every one of the cases I've been involved in, the results are all exactly the same," as Colossus watches over a sleeping Ileana. I like the little Nightcrawler doll here. "What I'm trying to tell ye is there's no treatment. Once contracted, this virus is terminal," as Colossus turns out the light. So there you go. I hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men number 300 with this flashy holofoil cover. See that? $3.95. The regular price was $1.25. So you're getting 56 pages of story here. Not quite worth the price of entry. They're really making money on this one, but great story and art by Romita Jr. and a welcome return from this vantage point anyway, from 2023, looking at his art here. As I said, originally at the time I was a little disappointed, but I did come around to appreciate Romita Jr.'s art. But looking at this now, it's just fantastic in my opinion. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. If you liked the video, please like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.